Hello everyone. Welcome to the Ocean Sound Storytelling Channel. I am the storyteller. And today, I am so happy to be with you. You may be curled up under a blanket or listening with your ears on a soft pillow. Wherever you are, whatever the time, thank you for being here. Before we begin with an interesting story, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so I know you enjoy relaxing moments like this. Where are you from? Send me a little hello in the comments. I would love to know which corner of the world you are listening from. Now, relax your body. Close your eyes and let the gentle waves take you into a gentle story, a little strange, a little mysterious, but warm enough to lull you to sleep all night long. So, are you ready? Tonight's story begins. Bad reflections. I am not a well person. That isn't easy to admit, even though I understand that it is important to acknowledge that as fact. I am convinced that it all started the night of the storm. After the lightning strike and subsequent power surge from the night before, both washing machines at my apartment complex were on the fritz. It was a minor miracle that we had lost power for only a few minutes, and thank God my expensive surge suppressors did their job. As a combined freelance writer / web designer, I rely heavily on my computers for my livelihood, and imagining even one of them electrically fried just makes my cringe. The electric shock that knocked me on my ass was the real highlight of the evening, though. Strong summer evening thunderstorms were nothing new for our small Midwestern city, but this one was particularly impressive. Blinding flashes lit the windows, and booming thunder rolled and rattled the panes every few minutes. Not wanting to rely on the surge devices exclusively, I decided to quit working and power all my equipment down. Reaching down and unplugging the main computer power feed at the critical moment when the lightning-induced surge came through, I actually saw as well as felt the arc as it jumped from the wall outlet, first following the cord, then my hand as I pulled the plug out. It was quite a jolt, knocked me back a few feet and flat onto my back. I don't think I lost consciousness, but my whole body tingled and I smelled an ozone smell for hours afterward. Probably should have gone to the doctor just to get checked, but I'm mid-20s and still have some lingering adolescent male invincibility delusions, so I figured I'd survive and blew it off. Lugging dirty laundry down to the basement had never been one of my favorite pastimes, but add carting it a few blocks journey through the neighborhood, and you have a whole new level of annoyance. Nonetheless, there I sat the next day, but already in a state of commingled pain and numbness from just a few minutes in the rock-hard, cracked pink plastic chair, a new John Scalzi sci-fi in hand. So far, the background noises of the machines and other patrons, including not one, but two screaming toddlers, had prevented me from successfully reading a single page. A short eternity later, the washer containing my first load quite spinning, and sounded a brief buzz to alert me that it was done. Even though the laundromat was moderately crowded, I was lucky that there was an open dryer just opposite my washer, so I dutifully drugged myself out of the torture device, masquerading as a chair, and headed across the room. I bundled a large armful of my socks and tidy whities, turned and dexterously flipped open the dryer lid, only to receive another shock to my hand. This one thankfully much milder than the one from the night before. It still startled me though, and I yelled as I dropped my armload of clothes. "Son of a bitch!" A room full of eyes shifted my direction. "Sorry," I mumbled to no one in particular, returning to my chores. After finishing, I returned to my poor man's pink throne, determined to blot out all distractions and read. 5 minutes later, I was vegetating, staring aimlessly about the laundromat, That was when I first saw it. A hole where no hole should be, reflected in the convex glass door of the ancient washing machine directly across the room from where I sat. I thought, at first, it was a smudge, or even a ding in the glass. But then I noticed the same anomaly replicated in the machine door on either side of this one. The more I examined it, the reflected dark spot, if that's what it was, seemed to float behind me, down near the floor. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Over the next few hours, I washed and dried 3 loads, returning to watch the spot in between each. If I looked closely enough, I thought I could see it moving ever so slightly, sort of swirling and undulating. There was a hypnotic effect to it, so much so that the mother of one of the screaming kids had to poke me to let me know my last load was done. Finally finished, I stuffed my clothes into a couple pillowcases that were serving as laundry bags and staggered blurry-eyed from the building. Once outside, my head somewhat cleared, and interest in my recent temporary fixation began to wane. My focus turned instead to contemplate the work that I was now seriously behind on, thanks to the storm and extended laundry duties, as I headed for home. Walking up the steps to my building, momentarily fumbling for my keys, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the glass windows that outlined the main doorway, and I froze. The spot, or whatever the damn thing actually was, had somehow followed me. I stared in confusion. It didn't seem possible, yet there it was unmistakably in the reflection, hovering in the same vicinity behind me and just above the ground, like it had appeared before. I spun my head around, and just like before, there was nothing to be seen behind me. Against my better judgment, I spun my attention back to examine the reflection in the window. The spot was indeed there, but it had changed. While I had been walking home, it had grown larger and had begun to emit flashes of light from its swirling center. Just a speck appearing here and there, briefly shining through before the undulating mass rolled and blotted it out again. And along with the reflection, there was now an accompanying sound, a faint tinkling, like a set of wind chimes, coming from the direction of the spot. Unlike chimes, though, that came and went randomly with the wind, these played a melodic tune. Their cadence captured my attention, the rhythm lulling me into a trance. I listened and I stared. For how long? I couldn't say. With some effort, I pulled my gaze away from the window and the spot, focusing down on my now clenched hands. The chimes cut off cleanly as the spot slipped from my peripheral vision. Fear replaced my confusion. I quickly unlocked the door and hurried inside, my heart pounding out a trip hammer beat. I needed to get to my apartment, but avoid anything reflective along the way. The elevator was out of the question, so I kept my head down and headed for the stairs. The stairway provided temporary safety, with its dingy concrete steps and unadorned walls. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. As I climbed, I began to inventory the hazards that still awaited me. Once inside my own door, there lurked a multitude of windows, pictures, and mirrors, both big and small. TVs, appliances, and even my computers, and all had to be avoided. I reached my door without incident, and took a few moments to calm my nerves. As I waited, I couldn't help questioning the reality of what I thought had just happened. Was I really cowering outside my own door? In the hallway, I had traversed countless times, afraid of seeing some malevolent object in anything reflective. I tried to tell myself that this was foolishness, akin to a kid afraid of the dark for no apparent reason, other than it wasn't light. Or was there a better explanation? The shock during the storm. That had to be the cause, I reasoned. Maybe some brain damage, not much. but enough to make me see spots and floating objects that weren't really there, and hear things that weren't there either. Why not? I had not quite, but almost convinced myself that this could all be rationally explained. I still wasn't ready to raise my line of sight above floor level, but I entered the apartment much calmer than I had been only moments before. I thought about the little kid me again, afraid of the dark, and remembered walking through the house turning on all the lights, telling myself that even though I wasn't really afraid, the lights were just a harmless precaution. With that as my mindset, I retrieved a handful of towels and blankets and proceeded through my apartment, covertly covering anything reflective as I went. Collapsing at my desk, having covered my monitors with a sheet, I started theorizing how I could live like this until I could get to a doctor for help. I rationalized, even if the spot wasn't real, I still had to deal with its effects until I could be assured that it was gone. As I was ticking off tasks needed to stay functional, disable monitor screensavers, figure out how to go out in public, maybe wear a hoodie with the strings pulled tight to minimize my field of view, my phone rang. I reflexively reached for it out of habit and had just enough time to register that it was my mom calling before I saw it again, reflected in the dark glass of my cell phone. It floated higher now, and it was still growing, perhaps balloon-sized now. I could see variation in colors, shades of gray to black, swirling and heaving in rippling folds. The flashes of light had increased their brightness, still appearing briefly in the dark mass before being reconsumed. The chimes returned as well, grabbing my attention so completely that answering my mother's call was beyond my capabilities. I watched and listened, unsure whether sight or sound was the more compelling sensation. As my phone ringing stopped, I heard another sound, low and hidden underneath the chimes. There was nothing melodic about this new sound, and it struck a fresh fear into my mind. It resonated wet and heavy, like some ancient Lovecraftian god of old dragging itself from dark, mysterious depths. As I listened, the chimes clashed with the new noise in a strange auditory battle for supremacy. As I watched, the spot slowly grew. I could see it changing in the reflection, but knew it was occurring behind me, and at the same time, knew that there would be nothing there to see if I had been able to turn and look. Rigid with fear, I couldn't look away, helpless to alter my situation. As I sat incapacitated, a fresh horror arose. Like soft tendrils at first, I sensed what felt like a pair of many-fingered hands creep over my shoulders and down my chest. Their caress was almost sensual as they moved down to me waist, where the sensation changed to a grip. There was no real strength in the ghostly hands, but the feeling was inexplicably drawing me backward, back to where the spot awaited. Sensual became coaxing. Coaxing turned to seductive, then finally approached insistence. Unable to resist, I tried rolling myself backward as I sat in the desk chair. The chair casters did not turn smoothly against the carpet, or I might have succeeded in my retreat to God. Only knows what fate the spot had planned for me. As I flexed my legs to overcome the drag of the carpet, my loving yet meddlesome mother came to my rescue. I hadn't answered her previous call, and she hadn't left a message. Her routine in such situations was to wait 10 minutes and call again, using the time to compose an appropriately thoughtful yet guilt-inducing message to leave. The phone chirped loudly in my hand, enough to startle me and cause me to drop it. Luck being on my side for once in my life, it landed screen down. I pulled a slew of papers, coasters, and even a dirty plate off my desk, whatever was within reach, to cover it. The onslaught had ceased in a flash. I spent the rest of that night living like a blind man. I tied a shirt around my head for a blindfold and wore it constantly, not trusting myself to just keep my eyes closed. Somehow, with face recognition and Siri's help, I managed to call and check the hours for the urgent care facility a few blocks away, my plan being to arrive as the doors opened in the morning. After inexplicably getting a few hours sleep, mostly from exhaustion, and having neither eaten nor showered since the previous morning, I found myself contemplating just how best to navigate walking the 6 blocks to the doctor. I couldn't very well walk down the street blindfolded, so I had employed my hoodie idea. With the opening pulled down to just an unnerving few square inches, I ventured out. Other than sideswiping a garbage can and nearly colliding with a couple of emerging coffee shop patrons, my tunnel vision trek was proceeding without any serious issues until I needed to cross the main road. So far, I had only encountered side street intersections with little to no traffic at this hour, but the medical facility was on the opposite side of the 4-lane. As I waited at the light, head down and listening for the chirping noise that told me it was safe to cross, I reassuringly told myself that I was going to make it, that the doctor would scan my head, prescribe a pill, or send me to some specialist who would know exactly how to cure what ailed me. Having made it this far unscathed, I was feeling just a sliver of optimism as the chirp came and I stepped into the street. I may have been distracted, or it may have made no difference. I heard a motor racing, just a bit, to my right. Nothing particularly menacing, but enough to draw my attention. Just like answering the phone, I instinctively looked up ever so slightly to assure myself that I wasn't about to be run over. And there it was. A spotlessly clean storefront window, advertising the coming fall fashions. Spotless, that is, except for the spot I had been avoiding. The result was instantaneous. The ethereal chimes and fearsome dragging sounds, the forceful groping fingers upon my chest, urging me backward, and the sight of the ever-growing surging spot itself, all manifested collectively. Reflected in the glass, the spot now loomed, grown larger than me. Its depths beckoned, its darkness seductive. I stopped, then reversed direction in the crosswalk, shuffling backward toward the maw of the thing that had been pursuing me. I was a part of the reflection this time, and I watched as my fate unfolded behind me. The flashing lights became blue-white arcs, dancing wildly just behind me, reaching out to welcome me or strike me dead, I knew not which. When a delivery truck pulled to the stoplight and blocked the window from my view, released, I collapsed. Horns blared, onlookers undoubtedly gawked, and a young girl actually stepped up and asked me if I needed help. I ignored them all, abandoning my optimistic hopes for a medical miracle cure. I staggered to my feet, pulled my hoodie strings tighter, and ran. I desperately wanted to run away. But how can you run away from a reflection, from an entity that follows you always? So I ran towards something, or rather, somewhere. I ran blindly to the laundromat. It made no logical sense, but logic had been left far behind sometime yesterday. As I had laid awake last night, my mind had reeled through scenarios, causes, and plans for what had been happening. The doctor had remained as plan A. My plan B made no sense whatsoever, but it flowed forward like a lifeline as I ran. Miraculously, I arrived at the laundromat without being run over or seeing another reflection. The laundromat hadn't opened yet, but that wasn't going to deter me. I pried the painted metal top off a public trash can, and with my eyes closed, beat it against the front window until it shattered. I carefully crawled through and headed for the door in the rear of the building marked Employees Only. It was thankfully unlocked. Once inside, it took little time to find something that would serve my purposes. a large screwdriver, and an old toolbox. Back in the laundromat was an array of electrical panels mounted on the back wall, variously marked high voltage, danger 220/208 volts, or just electrical hazard. I had noticed these while gazing idly about the room the day before. Without hesitating to think, I pried the door open on the largest of the panels, held the screwdriver by the metal blade to assure good contact, and jammed it across the incoming leads. And woke up here in the hospital in the psychiatric ward about 2 weeks ago. Guess you know the rest, Doc. I refused to open my eyes until anything reflective was removed from the room, the curtains drawn. Not sure what else I demanded, but I got sedated for it. I do remember. Under the care of your colleagues, though, I'm calmer and less prone to delusions. In just this short time, I've progressed to where I can actually look at myself in a mirror. I don't like to, but I can do it. Well, you do seem to have made incredible progress, Mr. Buchanan. Please, just Jerry. Okay, Jerry. And I did want to apologize again for you getting shuffled about here a bit. We seem to have quite the rash of absenteeism lately. I hope there isn't anything contagious being passed around. Oh, I'm sure you'll get to the bottom of it, Doc, I said, rising and extending my hand. I wanted to thank you and your team again for all you've done. As he reached out to shake my hand, he flinched his own. Oh, got a little shock from you, Jerry. Yeah, that happens. Probably just static. Greedy Gary's ghosts. It was pitch black when Greedy Gary shuffled out of his house at 6 a.m. one freezing January morning. Everyone knew him as Greedy Gary because he loved his grub and ate massive portions of meat for every meal. Whether it was bacon buddies, burgers, fried chicken, or his personal favorite, lamb doner kebab, no salad, Greedy Gary lived for meat. Gary didn't love his nickname, but he'd grown tired of telling people off for using it. And deep down, Gary knew he was a bit greedy compared to others. But he wasn't doing anybody any harm. He set the engine running, then started de-icing the van. Gary was quite unfit, so was soon puffing hard from the effort. Despite only wearing t-shirt and shorts in the freezing temperatures, he was drenched in sweat as he heaved himself up into the cab. Once on the road, Gary decided that, as he'd just done some exercise already, an early breakfast was in order. So he pulled into his favorite lay-by pit stop, shook an angry fist at the long line of lorries, and parked a few hundred yards from where he wanted to. Greedy Gaza, mate. Usual, is it? Said the burger van man. A puffed-out Gary nodded in reply. 5 minutes later, Gary climbed back into his cab and placed the white tea with 3 in the cup holder, and a dinner plate-sized triple belly buster, sausage and bacon, bap on the dashboard. Gary slurped the grease off his fingers, took the polystyrene cup in one hand, and licked his lips as a juicy, meaty aroma filled the cab. Wouldn't eat that if I were you, said a strange, squealing voice. Gary screamed, jumped a foot in the air, and launched hot tea over the windscreen. It took a moment to register what happened. Someone else was in the van with him. He took a tentative peek to his left. A see-through pig was sat there, grinning. "Fright number 3042, snort," said the pig. "Hello, greedy Gary. So sorry. Not sorry to scare you." Gary's chins trembled. What the? Who are you?" "I'm Kevin, snort," said Kevin the pig. "Kevin? Yes, Kevin Bacon. Nice to meet you." Gary burst out laughing, and the whole van shook. "Oh, nice one, nice one. This is one of them TV prank shows, innit? Kevin Blooming Bacon." Kevin turned his head to one side, observing this curious reaction. "This isn't a TV show, Gary." Yeah, it is. You're one of them. Whatchamacallit, virtual thingies, right? You mean virtual reality?" Gary beamed at how smart he was. Yeah, that's the one. Nice one. Proper got me." Kevin shook his head at how thick humans can be. "I'm not a virtual reality pig from a TV show. I am the ghost of breakfasts past." "Snort?" Gary stopped laughing, raised an eyebrow, then quivered. "Ghost?" Gary didn't care much for ghosts. "Yes, I'm dead. Butchered many moons ago," said Kevin, who flew out through the windscreen and back again to show that he really was a ghost. Gary's face turned as white as the empty foam cup in his hand. "A ghost? Pig? That talks?" "Yes, and as I was saying, I am the ghost of breakfasts past, snort, and I'm here to show you the error of your ways." Kevin narrowed his eyes in that way that talking dead pigs do when they need to be serious. "Gary, 5 minutes ago, you became the official biggest meat eater in the world." Gary unclenched his butt cheeks just a little as curiosity got the better of him. "Really? How come?" "The previous holder of that dubious title died about 5 minutes ago," said Kevin with a solemn shake of his head. "Heart attack got him. Was only 36. Mexican fella. Chili Chico, they called him. Ate nothing for 20 years but beef and pork chili." Gary pumped his fist in the air. "Yes, I'm a world record holder, wahoo." Kevin once again cocked his head and observed Gary's misplaced joy at benefiting from a young man's untimely demise. Gary had missed the message that Chili Chico was only 2 years older than him. Chico was a gentle soul who tried to listen to Kevin, but just couldn't change his ways in time. But this obnoxious, greedy Gary was something else. Perhaps Kevin's hardest case yet. It was time for something less subtle. So Kevin clicked his trotters and transported them both back to a vision of Gary's recent past. They were in the local hospital. Gary's eyes grew wider than his breakfast bap as he saw himself sprawled out on a bed with his loving wife, Stacy, crying by his side. Multiple cables connected his body to multiple machines. Gary remembered why he was there, how he had clutched his chest and collapsed at the cafe, how he never got to finish his third full English breakfast. "You're lucky this time," said the doctor to patient Gary from the past. Take this as a warning shot. You must change your high-fat diet, eat less meat, and more fresh fruit and vegetables. I'm referring you to a specialist dietitian. The painful memory faded away, and Gary found himself back in his van, still accompanied by a talking, see-through pig. You never saw the dietitian, did you, Gary? Said Kevin. You did not heed the warning, Snort. Gary huffed. He was tired of being lectured. Right. I've had enough of your guilt-tripping, Mr. Kevin Blooming Bacon. So leave me alone, Mr. Ghost of Breakfasts Past, 'cause the only breakfast I care about is the one in front of my nose. So why don't you trot off and let me eat in peace? Gary scooped up the triple belly buster, brought it to his saliva-glistened lips, and opened his mouth as wide as London Tower Bridge. Gary, no, cried Kevin. Do you even know what that sausage is made of? Piggy guts and lips and bum holes. Guts and lips and bum holes, Snort. I know, said Gary, as he munched down on the many greasy layers of processed pig. Delicious. A single ghostly tear rolled down Kevin's pinkish cheek, and then he vanished. Gary shrugged, chucked the plastic cup out of the window onto the grass verge, then drove onto work. Finally, it was lunchtime, and greedy Gary was ravenous. At tea break earlier, when he'd opened up his snack box, he found that kind, sweet Stacy had packed 3 of his favorite sausage rolls. What a treat. But he couldn't bring himself to take a single bite. He hadn't really enjoyed all of his triple belly buster earlier, after the whole Ghost of Breakfasts Past shenanigans. It didn't sit right, and not just in his stomach, and Gary worried that Kevin was angry with him. But that was ages ago, and now greedy Gary could eat a horse. So he hustled over to the on-site Porta-Cabin canteen. Greedy Gary. Usual, me love? Asked the woman behind the counter. Gary nodded and rubbed his hands in glee. Some workmates called him to come and sit with them, but then Gary remembered Kevin. What if he comes back in front of everyone? So Gary took his Mega Cheese Power Tower burger that was as big at his thick head, stacked with 8 regular burgers and as many gooey slices of processed cheese, back to his digger to eat in peace. He opened his ginormous cake hole and wouldn't eat that if I were you, said a deep, slow voice. Gary froze. Not again. He lowered the basketball-sized burger, and his jaw dropped. The huge head of a see-through cow grinned at him. "Ah!" screamed Gary. He launched his burger like a grenade at the spooky intruder. But the greasy missile just sailed straight through and splattered cheesy beef all over the windscreen. Well, that's no way to greet a lady, said the cow. I'm Patty Moo. Gary's face went red with rage. Well, Patty Moo, why don't you Patty do one? I'm getting sick of this. You're getting sick of this? Said Patty. You're getting sick of this? How dare you, Moo? I died to give you that burger. And then you literally throw it back in my face. Gary recoiled and squinted his eyes. What did you say? I said, I died to give you that burger. You were about to eat my mashed up rump. I am the ghost of lunches present, Moo. And I'm here to show you the error of your ways. Gary didn't know what to say. His brain whirled with all the possibilities he could think of. All two of them. This new ghost could well be pulling his leg. The whole thing could be a massive wind-up or a TV prank show. But if not, nothing personal, said Gary. A man's gotta eat. Then his chins started trembling again. You're not going to eat me, are you? Patty burst into deafening laughter. Oh, nice one, Gary. Nice one. No, you don't look much like a tasty grass meadow. I think you're safe on that front, Moo. Then Patty lowered her long eyelashes in that way that talking dead cows do when they need to be serious. Do you ever think about where your food really comes from? Gary screwed up his face at the stupid question. It comes from whoever cooks it. Patty rolled her beautiful big eyes. But what about before that? For example, where do you think I came from? Some field, I suppose, said Gary. A cramped and dusty feed pen, actually, said Patty. I never got to eat grass, though I could see it growing just across the yard, to make your mega cheese power tower. Burger Gary, I was fattened up on corn, soy, and growth hormone drugs. Moo, Gary just shrugged. Tastes good though, don't it? Patty tilted her head to one side and thought about what to do with this particularly obnoxious and uncaring human. This was Patty's first assignment as the ghost of lunches present. And Kevin warned her she'd been thrown in the deep end with Gary. Patty was a cow who hadn't spent any time with humans yet, so she didn't really know what the pig meant. But she got the gist. It was time for something less subtle. So Patty clicked her hooves and transported them both to the Amazon rainforest, at least where much of it used to be. Dawn was just breaking in this part of the world, but instead of the sunlight beaming through the cracks of a lush, dense canopy, it rose in plain sight from the east horizon and lit up a barren, brown wasteland. There was nothing but bare earth as far as the eye could see. The land had been plowed into long columns that stretched onward into the distance, but nothing grew here yet. This land was dead. Gary's chins quivered like jelly. Where are we? Is this the afterlife, in a way? Yes, said Patty. We're in Brazil, present day. But just 1 year ago, on this very spot, ancient towering trees would have blocked the sky out, and all manner of creatures, now either fled or dead, called this unspoilt wilderness home, from mighty jaguars to endangered tree frogs and countless species of insects. Gary looked around again and imagined the scene that Patty described. he and Stacy enjoyed the odd nature documentary during their TV dinners. A strange sense of loss came over him. What happened here? Humans, moo. Humans came, with diggers 5 times bigger than your one, and flattened the rainforest. Soon they will plant soy here, endless miles upon miles of soybeans, to fatten up cattle around the world like me for cheap beef. The tragic scene faded away, and Gary found himself back in his digger, still accompanied by a talking, see-through cow. Patty's big, searching eyes looked deep into Gary's own, as if they were a window into his soul. So, Gary, now you know the cost of your extreme diet. Will you change it? Gary hung his head. It's not every day that you meet the cow you're about to eat. And he was genuinely moved by experiencing the devastation of the rainforest. He thought that cows just roamed lush green fields in the English countryside. He had no idea of the global impact of his massive meat-munching habit. But then, something caught his attention. A smell. A most delicious smell. And his stomach rumbled. He caught sight of the mega cheese power tower mess on the dashboard. Without thinking, as if on autopilot, he shoved a huge fistful of greasy burger into his greedy gob. Gary, no, cried Patty. But Gary just kept on chewing and chewing, lost in this moment of taste satisfaction, like some oblivious, carnivorous beast. A single, ghostly tear rolled down Patty's nose, and then she vanished. Gary gasped at what he had done. Patty, wait, I'm sorry. And some passing scaffolders gave him very weird looks indeed. After work, greedy Gary felt very glum, driving home in the pitch black, and more than a little worried about future visits from Kevin or Patty. A stream of befuddling questions raced through his mind. Can ghosts take revenge? Can they hurt or even kill someone? What will happen if I eat pork or beef again? His head felt fit to burst from all this thinking and conflicting feelings, and his heart ached with guilt and shame. He wasn't proud to be the biggest meat eater in the world anymore. He wanted to be greedy Gary no longer. He just wanted to be Gary and to live and eat normally without causing all this pain and destruction. And then his stomach rumbled again, as if on cue to test his resolve, just as he passed his favorite fried chicken shop. Perfect. No red meat, said Gary, as he parked up outside. Greedy Gary, my very best customer, called out the chicken shop man. Usual, is it? Gary considered the menu carefully. Just one super-size bone lickin' bucket today, please. I'm on a diet. Good for you, my friend. And great choice. Chicken is so healthy. Gary climbed back into his van and placed the 20 bits of battered bird on the passenger seat. Pulling back onto the road, he reached across with a greedy hand. "Wouldn't do that if I were you, Squawk," said a screechy voice beside him. Gary's heart sunk, and his chins trembled faster than ever. Stood atop that mountain of deep-fried food was a rather angry-looking see-through hen. Gary couldn't speak, so the chicken did. "I'm prisoner 1,000,005. The ghost of dinners yet to come, Squawk. And I'm here to show you the error of your ways." This bird had read Kevin and Patty's reports on Gary. The time for being nice was over, so she clicked her beak and transported him to the hell she knew all too well. Gary screamed, or rather squawked. Countless chickens and their poo surrounded him. The awful din and stench was overwhelming. He seemed rather small as well, or these hens were human-sized. His vision was weird and intense. Bright colors flooded his mind from every angle. The great mass of birds crushed and pecked him, each fighting for space and air. He looked down at his own spindly chicken feet and let out the most terrifying squawk. He couldn't talk. He couldn't breathe. Then one big old bird bundled him over, and another fell full onto his leg. Crack! Gary the chicken squawked in agony and knew this was the end for him. This was the animal ghost's payback. Then the frightful vision faded away, and greedy Gary was back in his digger, and human once more. He felt his sweating face and leg. No beak, no break. It was just a dream. A vision. Where was that? He said to the fierce-looking ghost of dinners yet to come. A nearby intensive chicken meat factory. 1 year from now, after you and your workmates have finished building it. The color from Gary's face drained, and he wept giant tears of shame. Please, oh gracious ghost of dinners yet to come, please give me another chance. I'll stop working there. I'll make them all stop. I will. And, said the ghostly hen. I'll stop eating meat, I promise. I swear it on my life. The ghost of dinners yet to come smiled, just a little. You had better keep those promises, Gary. We will be watching, Squawk. And then she vanished. Gary threw the supersized bone-licking bucket in the nearest bin and drove home as quickly as he could. Greedy Gary breathed an enormous sigh of relief as he opened his front door. He couldn't wait for a big hug from his lovely wife. "Oh, hello, love," called Stacy. "I've got your favorite for dinner. 4 lamb doner kebabs, no salad." Gary screamed and ran away as fast as he could. He hadn't sprinted since he was a young boy, but the fear propelled him on. His heart pounded, his legs throbbed, but on he ran down his street, all the way to the corner shop. And there, in that moment, Gary did something he'd never done before in his whole life. He brought some vegetables. Well, a tin of baked beans. But we've all got to start somewhere. Over my dead body, I sit in the corner of the embalming room, watching as the mustached man drains the blood from my corpse. The corpse lies on a metal table, covered in a white tarp. And there is a faint choker of purple bruising and checkered abrasions around my neck. The blood in the tubes is purple-colored, with streaks of black. My irises are cloudy white films. My pupils are fading black, lifeless dots. As the mortician hooks me up to the embalming machine with its pump and wires, and the cold fluid enters the veins of my body, I feel nothing. I kind of shiver anyway, out of habit. This is skeevy as hell. Funny thing, I spent my whole life being afraid of death. Looks like I ripped that Band-Aid off. So, what am I doing here, in this musty, dimly lit room? What the hell happened? Obviously, there's some kind of life after death. Mystery solved. But sitting here now, watching my dead body, I've got questions. Lots of questions. Next in line, after those lovely aforementioned quagmires, is why in the hell is this dude singing to my corpse? Like, can you get any creepier? The mortician is singing, knocking on heaven's door as he embalms me. Am I in hell? Wow. Pitchy much. Not only that, but his voice is hoarse and raspy, like he is breathing through a lifetime of Marlboro Reds. I can actually see the emphysema in his lungs, seeing disease. I guess that's one of those lovely abilities one acquires after traveling through the valley of the shadow. And that's me, Amelia. And this is what my life has amounted to. A pale, bloated slab of festering lunch meat. Pathetic. I'm vaguely angry. I don't feel outraged and cheated or anything like that. Not looking to get back into that saggy meat sack. I'm ready to move on. It's more of a boiling bloodlust, an impulse to do harm, to set things right. Unfinished business. I want restitution. But for what? And against whom? There's no way I took the coward's way out. So how did I die? I try to remember, but the last thing I can recall is drinking IPAs and taking John O shots with Eddie at McGillen's old ale house on Drury Street, discussing the scoop I'd been working on. I walk into the casket showroom, which is directly across from the embalming room, and flip on the lights. Turns out, this is another one of my special abilities. The room has a gaudy chandelier, various shades of white on the walls and trim, and cheap green inch-thin carpeting. By the wall is a dingy, moth-eaten couch and stacked plastic chairs. Things are set up for the wake that evening. There are several stands full of freshly delivered flowers, with notes attached, giving their condolences. A poster board with flattering photographs, many of which feature me and my sister, Sarah. A table with a guest book, and some assorted personal items. A dictaphone, a few articles I had framed, showcasing my work. A trophy from high school. Blah, 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 blah. I imagine the setting of my death, which I'm guessing was pegged as a suicide by the total lack of mention in the obituary or anywhere else. An inky black shadow appears in front of me, which I somehow recognize as a portal, and it is filled with static, like on an old-time 1980s black and white television set, whose antennas are not set up right. I place my right hand through. It is like jumping into ice-cold water. I am pulled in, and everything goes black. Seconds later, I find myself in a different time and place, in the basement/laundry room of my walk-up Kensington apartment on J Street. Now this is my kind of party. No, not really, Pervo. I'm being facetious. This is a JOMO situation. Besides, this entire room screams setup. Way too fleeky. The crime scene looks like the set of a bizarre porno. Chains, sex toys, a whip, an empty tequila bottle, and a bejeweled, cone-shaped polka dot party hat with glitter. These items are spiraled around my naked body, which is splayed out in an unnatural pose. There is a gratuitous can of whipped cream on an end table, brought to you by the set design team for Leaving Las Vegas. There are diamond-shaped imprints crisscrossing my throat. Kinky. These roughly match the links of a utility chain and master lock dangling from a pipe on the ceiling. There's the homicide detective on his cell phone by the staircase. What is he doing? Taking a coffee break? How about bagging some evidence, dude? I guess that's too much to ask. No suicide note. A flared red mini dress with sequins, fucking sequins, is hanging from an actual hanger on the back of a chair in the corner. What am I? Going to a ballet recital? And that isn't even my size. Who hangs themselves naked, by the way? Asking for a friend. What grown-ass woman wants a bunch of strangers staring at her hoo-ha and critiquing her post-mortem body? And if I'm guessing, someone would have had to have sedated me to get my clothes off without simultaneously losing their groping hands in the process. Good to see forensics is on top of things, seeing as it didn't appear that I had even been given an autopsy, let alone a post-mortem tox screen. Wouldn't want to burden toxicology with ruling out the ruthless murder of a local investigative reporter. Jesus. And here we have Exhibit A through Exhibit motherfucking Z. Forensics hasn't bothered taking any DNA off of my fingers, which are lacerated near the fingernails and probably have some kind of identifying biological evidence. But why bother with that? Taxpayer dollars and all. I certainly wasn't grasping at the chain if I did this to myself. So, query me this. Why do I have lacerations and biological matter under my fingernails? Because I was having such a good time before accidentally shuffling off the mortal coil. These brown brick buildings are so old, the entire basement is probably an asbestos dead zone. I wouldn't be caught dead in. Ha! Guess I fucked that one up. I walk to the corner of the room, where I can feel an inky black void of icy cold drawing me in. Another portal begins to shake into existence, static and all. Seconds later, I am back in McGillen's old ale house on Drury Street. The place is filled with Phillies fans, dressed in jerseys and sports tees and sweatpants, swilling beer from octagonal plastic mugs and playing beer pong in the corner by the dartboard. The place smells like a fraternity basement. It's Getting Hot in Hera by Nelly is blaring a bit too loudly as most of the bargoers have their eyes fastened to the flat screens. Sitting at a table under the neon lighting near the bar is Alex. He's a friend, and he works for Congressman David Lebovitz. He's all suited up and out of place, with that annoying American flag pin on his lapel. He's our slightly douchier Barney Stinson. I'd say we love him for it, but he's suspect numero uno at the moment. Julia Denham is sitting across from him, a chirpy Asian woman who is a PR agent for various politicos around town. She is one of those annoying people who tries valiantly to tell everyone what they want to hear and gives the most annoying, try-hard vibes you've ever experienced. I overhear the two of them discussing Alex's promotion to campaign manager. Interesting. He seems a bit young for that position. And I didn't know he was a social climber. Judging by his drinking habits, I wouldn't have guessed he had so much closet ambition. I'm so happy for you, Alex. You've always been my favorite. So dashing and talented. Well done, sir. And well done is better than well said, Julia says. Here, here, Alex said, raising his mug in a token cheers. The important thing is to focus on David's military background, Julia says. Agreed. The public eats that stuff up, Alex says. Lots of pushback from the union lobbyists. We really need to lock in union support, too, Julia says. You know there have been rumors about campaign finance issues, hence Jerry being canned, Alex says. We need to silence those rumors, Julia says. I've been working on it, Alex says. This son of a bitch. Did he do it himself? All of my anger boils over and lumps up in my throat, and I look directly into that bitch's face as I scream out, "You bastard!" at the top of my lungs. You bastard, Julia says. Excuse me? Alex says. Holy shit. I've got ventriloquism abilities. I can speak through the living. Okay, focus. Amelia, you can do this. That bastard. I meant, that bastard, I say, through Julia. Interestingly, she doesn't seem to realize I'm speaking through her. You mean Amelia? Alex asks. Yes, that pesky Giorno. We need to make sure she doesn't put the congressman under the microscope or attract unnecessary media attention, I say, through Julia. I wouldn't worry about her. I hear she's a freak and has been on a drug bender lately. I'm sure she can be easily discredited if she ever even gets around to writing that hit piece, Alex says. Are you fucking serious? I say, through Julia. What? Alex says. I mean, wouldn't want to see her have an unfortunate accident, I say, through Julia. No, wouldn't want that, Alex says with a chuckle. This son of a bitch. At least I know who I'm haunting now. And I am going to haunt this bastard into extinction. You're in for a dead reckoning, Paolo. You think you are getting off scot-free on this one? Over my dead body. I distinctly remember, after about a half-dozen Jum-O shots, spilling the beans to Eddie about the scoop I had on the congressman. And Alex had been there, drinking with us that night. I'd laid it all out, given him the goods on a silver platter. How I had a source that Congressman Lebovitz had been funneling campaign funds provided by developer Gerald Bundler, a big-time party faithful, over to several local city councilmen to buy their votes on a zoning and buildings approval. Bundler needed the votes to secure zoning approvals and tax abatements for a gaudy luxury residential tower, unoriginally called the Summit, that does Zippo for Kensington, but which would make Bundler a pretty penny. The two of them slam their mugs together and cheer their damnable conspiracies, and I see an inky black static portal forming over by the dartboard. I walk through two college-age kids playing beer pong. I walk the length of the table. I swat the ball away as I go, and it goes bouncing under a table in the middle of the bar. I knock over a few solo cups, too, for shits and giggles. I step through the portal. Sarah and Eddie are drinking Dunkin' Donuts coffee at the shop by my apartment, seated at cringy tables in the dingy, beat-up walk-in area, which has taken a back seat to the drive-thru, as people have been growing increasingly antisocial. Sarah is my 2-year younger sister. And Eddie, well, you know Eddie, my fellow reporter, best friend. And if I'd lived long enough, there was some underlying chemistry that had us set on a course to eventually fuck. But I guess it is up to Sarah to light that torch if she ever has the inclination. My dance card is a bit full now. What with solving my own murder, time and space portals, learning new supernatural abilities, and figuring out how to pass on to the great beyond. And I'm presently sequestered in a different realm where I can't actually directly interact with the living. So that ship has sailed. She was happy, Sarah. Really happy. I just, Eddie says, in my mental monologue, I think, really wanted to jump her bones. But that's the thing. I have a dirty mind. See her taking her life? Sarah interrupts. Yeah. No. I am not buying it. But I can't help feeling guilty. Maybe there was something I missed. Maybe she was in some kind of trouble, and I didn't see the signs, Eddie says. Maybe if I had just sacked up and made a move that night, she never would have been home alone to be drugged and framed for suicide. I'm sorry. I'll stop. My sister was stubborn to a fault. If she was going to fall on her sword, which she never would have done, you can be damned sure she'd take someone down with her. Someone evil. Someone who deserved it. She never wasted a chance to make a statement, Sarah says. Damn right, sissy. Do you know anyone who would want to do her harm? I say, through Sarah. I can't think of anyone, Eddie says. Was there like a story she was working on? Anyone that might have had cause to shut her up? I ask, through Sarah. Well, Congressman Lebovitz. She was doing a hit piece, Eddie says. And anyone know about the piece who might have, maybe, wanted to stop it? I ask, through Sarah. Only Alex, Eddie says, continuing. Holy shit. Alex was there that night, and he just got promoted to campaign manager. Eddie, you aren't just a pretty face. Good boy. Now off to make a statement. I arrive in hell. And by that, I mean the Kensington neighborhood of North Philly, above Fishtown. They call it the Badlands. Upstanding citizens are locked indoors, afraid to come outside into the drugs and crime that are ubiquitous. It stands to reason why some developer wants to plow all this away and implant a bunch of yuppies to gentrify the area. But it doesn't mean it's any substitute for cleaning up this mess. Move it out of here, it just ends up someplace else. Philly dope is a thing. $5 a bag. And the stuff is vicious. It is cut with damnation and ill intent. And that is part of the marketing. No joke. There is an open-air drug market on Kensington Avenue that rivals the Roman Forum in terms of sheer brutality. Unsanitary conditions, market domination, carnage, and bloodshed. It bears all the hallmarks of utopia, largest open-air selling market on the East Coast. By a long shot, you can straight up buy fentanyl. Over 200 deaths per year. The place should be swarming with spooks, but I'm the only one that I see. Against a landscape of row houses, abandoned factories, and vacant lots, only Camden more closely resembles Afghanistan. Across the street, there's a Chinese takeout with stock green signage, a nickel laundry that is shuttered, a check cashing joint with padlocked roll-up security doors already down at noon, and an Irish pub called Flanagan's, where people are openly selling drugs outside without even swiveling their heads to look for cops. As Alex walks below the Kensington Avenue underpass on his way to a union rally, he passes by a mattress lying on the lawn of an empty lot by the sidewalk, near a bent-over red fire hydrant. He keeps his head down and walks quickly. I inhabit a bum and say, "Got any change, murderer?" Alex flinches, but doesn't break stride. As he keeps walking, I inhabit a homeless woman who is high as hell and collecting used needles to turn into prevention point for clean needles that can be sold for money. Her name is Renee. "You gonna clean up the neighborhood, Alex?" I say. Through her, he turns his head and says, "You know me. I know what you did," I say. Through her, "Jesus Christ," he says, and keeps walking. Eddie is at the rally at the Union Hall in Fishtown. Alex is standing by the congressman. Renee is in the audience. As the congressman gets on stage, Eddie confronts Alex about my death. My powers have increased, and I now possess Renee. As I approach the front of the auditorium in Renee's skin, I take the package of fentanyl out of my pocket. Eddie's face is red. Sweet boy. He has some sweat on his forehead. He is really putting Alex through his paces, laying out the evidence, providing information from the autopsy report, pointing out motive and opportunity. I taught him well. Pains me to think I won't be seeing much of him after this. As Eddie rushes off in a huff, and Alex stands there red-faced and nervous, I approach. "This is for you, you little shit," I say, through Renee, handing Alex a bag full of fentanyl. "Is this?" Alex says, "Yeah, you little pussy. If you want to take the easy way out. Detectives know what you did. Few of us pushers saw you that night, and they are coming for you," I say, through Renee. Alex looks around the room, grabs the fentanyl, and rushes out without waiting for the congressman. Alex is in his penthouse apartment, the Sterling Apartments in Center City. He sits on his microfiber couch, listless, afraid. I am there in the corner. A hypodermic needle sits on the table, and Alex is taking the coward's way out. I watch him as he puts the tourniquet around his arm. I watch the blood pool in the fluid as he injects the chemicals into the blood. His eyes close, and his head lays back on the plush sofa cushions. I am going to embarrass him, I think, strip him naked like he did me. But then another portal opens, warm, full of light, and pulls me in. Separation. Kristen's REM cycle crashed again into the guardrail. The one constant, morning to morning, was the heron. It was symbolic of nothing. Simply the last inhuman face she'd seen before the Miata, and Todd simultaneously punched holes in Lake Springfield. Something clattered above Kristen's head, followed by a disembodied curse. That, too, was part of the morning ritual, along with defoliation, granola, stout, deep roast drowned in hazelnut coffee mate, the digital journal register, the customized multivitamin, the Zoloft, the daily trailer for a watery grave. Her bare feet hit the hardwood floor. She'd removed the rugs after the California King became single occupancy, and the feel of sturdy, substantial phenite walnut under her was reassuring, if not comforting, as Todd's canvases and brushes and tools jostled about in the attic. Kristen prepared to meet the remains of the day. "Jenna, get you the perinatal clinic piece." Kristen didn't look up from her workstation. "Been in your inbox since 9. You got anything for the cover yet?" Oliver knew damned well Jenna had never missed a deadline. But the option of working remotely had been his editor's idea. And the closet incel had resented Jen stretching a COVID furlough into extended maternity leave, into a lifestyle choice necessary for Kristen to retain Springfield Alive's top feature writer. Oliver hungered for Jen's failure. Kristen wasn't about to let that happen. She owed her. "Reason I ask," Kristen murmured calmly, "is if you haven't committed anything to Illustrator yet, I'd like to give Bet a shot at it." Oliver stiffened, but she could virtually feel the vibrations across her desk. She finally glanced up, expressionless. "Bet's been here 6 months. You really think she—" "They," his boss interrupted bluntly. "Yes, I believe they're ready. But you make a point, in your own desensitized way. Bet's experienced childbirth. You rocked this month's cover on college basketball culture. I think Bet can bring something profound to this topic. Don't you think?" Tables tilted, if not turned. Oliver smiled very tightly. "About time they proved their mettle." "I agree," Kristen said, continuing the charade as she shot Jen's draft to the chief graphic designer. "And, by the way, I know it may seem unfair sometimes that Jen and Eli work from home, but there's nothing keeping you from availing yourself of the same option. We can supply you anything you need, including a state-of-the-art multi-terabyte Dell and a subscription to the Adobe Creative Cloud, yours to use professionally, and on that book of yours. Let me think about it." Oliver may waver. From what Kristen cared to glean, most of his off-duty hours seemed embroiled in ESPN or his literary opus, Gary the Ghostly Goat. Ad revenues were back up post-pandemic, and a franchise in the currently lucrative children's traumatization genre, subsidized by Springfield Alive, was an investment in Kristen's precarious sanity. But Oliver needed to remain close to the seat of power if he hoped someday to claim it. R.L. Stein could relax for the time being. When Kristen turned back, he'd vanished. Kristen peered out onto I-55 South. The mid-morning traffic had slowed, and the nearby Crown Plaza stood in crisp contrast to a cloudless spring sky. Rotunda Publications had been virtually surrounded by cornfields when she'd interned at the monthly. But the city was grazing noisily at what remained of the Aggie fringe. The glass-encased fourth-floor dead center office offered a broad view encompassing the distant State House dome and a suggestion of the lake to the south. Kristen had a few minutes before the superfluous weekly meeting with the publisher, and she scanned the passing parade. The figure was on the berm about 50 feet ahead of the 94 exit ramp. No floundered car in sight, No backpack or duffel. No obligatory cardboard sign indicative of the overconfident highway panhandler. And too far off the ramp for begging, anyway. Kristen planted her forehead against the double-paned glass, then brought the blinds down in a clatter that turned a dozen heads in the newsroom. Kristen was headed deep into a pleasant blur of Prosecco and Netflix when the text alert brought her back to reality, or her version of it, the last 8 months. She'd quit jumping for the phone on the coffee table after about the first 50 or so times, but the view out her window this morning suggested she might want to respond to this one. Rue lonely? The messages were always succinct, neutral, and yet seemingly potentially rich in tone and nuance. 2 possible interpretations, the one more discomfiting than the other, but not by much. Something screeched on the wood 2 floors up, and Kristen retrieved the lunetta and the remote. She had no idea whether birds possessed the capacity for terror. The static black eyes that greeted her a nanosecond before Miata and Heron collided in a momentary explosion of flesh and blood and feathers may merely have reflected the failure of the fight or flight mechanism, or renewed faith in the homicidal ingenuity of the human species. Todd already had breached the passenger side windshield, and she, the subconscious she, wondered. Had the Heron adjusted its flight pattern 2 feet, would they have shared a moment of communion, bouncing about the Miata, pondering the idiocy of hope and trust in forged steel and onboard sensors, in broad wings and open skies? She missed Todd piercing the molecular membrane. She always did. The Heron consistently was the 3rd wheel in this looping drama, and as the show replayed each dawn, Todd had become a supporting player. The Heron slammed into the tempered glass with an odd, muted, wooden impact, and Kristen's head popped from the pillow as the thumping continued above. "Sean wants you to call ASAP," Renee scolded mildly. "Everything all right?" Truck overturned on 55. We were stacked up for about a half hour. Renee began to clarify her inquiry, but her penetrating black eyes darted to the venti caramel macchiato in Kristen's fist. Kristen had decided a half hour of twisted metal and pebbled glass sitting on the 55 bridge merited a bonus dose of caffeine and sugar. See if Oliver got Bet everything they need for the June cover. As Kristen settled in, she noted Dr. Badgley had called back and weighed priorities. She placed her iPhone beside the cooling macchiato and punched the 3-digit extension for payroll. "Yeah, sorry," Sean piped with positively no regret. "You know we're trying to get everybody with the program on e-deposit, but I still haven't gotten what I need from..." "Look, I've got a meeting in about 5 minutes," Kristen said through her teeth. "Can we pick this up this afternoon?" "Let me see what I got on the old calendar." Kristen gently cradled the handset, took a therapeutic sip, steeled herself and recovered the smartphone. "Ms. Blackwood." Dr. Badgley answered almost immediately, cool and genial. "I understand you might want to talk." We hit the water almost simultaneously. We'd gotten separated, and then a bird hit the windshield. Big one, because the driver's airbag went off. Kind of a double-edged sword when you're about to turn into a submersible. Neither one of us knew what had happened to the other. "We can get back to that," the therapist suggested. What you're describing had to have been horrifyingly traumatic in the moment. But I sense you've since gone through considerable re-examination and second-guessing, and maybe even moments of self-recrimination. What are you feeling right now? As Kristen crossed the clinic parking lot, the text alert sounded. She strode on as she thumbed the green icon. "I see you." This time, the heron didn't appear until the crucial underwater finale. Some state cop told her after that Lake Springfield at some points was nearly 30 feet surface to sandy bottom. And as she came to with a flailing start, a broken white carcass floated past the ineffectual windshield, shedding feathers that receded toward the point of impact. In the murk, there was something angelic in the image, as sun and bridge shrank from view. Kristen awoke entirely on her own power, tangling sheets and flinging pillows and slipping onto the naked wood floor. She grappled for the mattress and climbed trembling to her feet. The sounds began as she reached for the knob. A seemingly urgent rustling. Wood on wood. Steps on ancient planks. Kristen twisted the knob, fairly fell into the hallway. The home was once a farmhouse, and a master bath had not even merited a thought. But now, she heard the presence in the attic begin to descend, and Kristen stumbled and pinballed off the walls, closing the gap between bedroom and toilet. As she slammed the door with her shoulder blades, the footfalls dopplered off toward the stairwell. Renee pursed her lips at Kristen's tardy entrance, but the look on the editor's face preempted any bon mot or chiding she might have at the ready. This time, the invasive concern that might have set Kristen off opened her up. "I don't know that's a rule or anything," the AA drawled as Kristen finished the abridged and edited version, nudging the steaming world's best porfritter mug toward her. "Though I don't think I ever died in a dream, so don't go by me. Hold up. Let's see what the Google says. Here we go. Dying can signify transformation or the end of something. Watching someone die in your dream can feel frighteningly realistic, but it's usually figurative. You might dream about someone dying if you're making big life changes, like leaving a job or ending a long-term relationship, for instance. Dreaming about dying can also motivate you to make a change that you've been putting off. For example, maybe you've been thinking about going back to school or repairing a broken relationship. Shit. I think they nailed it, girl. Ever since, you know, you've been walking around here like a zombie, and you haven't said word one about the thing, or especially about Todd. Don't want you going off on me or anything, but maybe that was your literal wake-up call. You've been putting off getting on, you ask me, which you didn't. So hey, the big man needs you upstairs. Kristen nodded numbly. I'm a little confused, he began, after she'd settled onto his faux leather couch. You weren't here the other day, so I asked Oliver to forward me the prenatal piece. Perinatal? Kristen instinctively corrected her publisher. I know how you feel about such things, but I was curious if this clinic might be good for some future ad revenues. But then I thought something seemed odd as I got into the piece. He turned to his monitor. As a team of top Springfield area OB-GYNs prepare to unveil a state-of-the-art conception to cradle, high-touch, low-intervention perinatal clinic and birthing center, the mood in the capital might be characterized as, well, expectant. That sound familiar? Yes, as I was the first one to read it, and one of only 2 people to have a copy, until you, of course. He ignored the indictment and plucked an open magazine from his desk. A Springfield Hospital's proposed cutting-edge maternity suites have local women and women's health specialists, to say the least, expectant. Remember that? Refresh your memory. March 2008. Kristen was silent for a moment. Oh my God. Seriously? How many pregnancy metaphors do you think there are? Just what are you trying to suggest? That Jenna plagiarized one of my obscure old features, even if she would have lifted my lead, which she would not. Wouldn't you think I'd notice? You apparently didn't. You didn't seem to remember writing it yourself. Now, the publisher was silent. What are you saying? He leaned back, creaking his overpriced throne for effect. This isn't the only similarity I've seen between your stories. So for my own peace of mind, I had personnel give me your girl's number. It had been disconnected, and when I investigated, turned out she's supposedly left town altogether. He adopted a pained, delicate expression. Now I know we don't pay top dollar. You think I'm double dipping? Kristen yelled, leaping from the cushions. Jen works from home, and she gets her copy to me on time and accurate. So I don't really give a shit where that home is. Maybe she should have let me know if she moved. But I understand she was in a difficult relationship, and she may not have wanted to air her laundry with me. Sit the fuck down, he rasped. Kristen stood her ground, panting in rage, and he sighed disgustedly. Sean tells me her last 2 checks haven't even cleared, and she's made no attempt to change over to electronic deposit like everybody else. I've been on her, but what am I supposed to do? And you say her checks haven't even cleared? That's certainly a brilliant scheme for me to cook up, isn't it? a publisher struck speechless is an editor/writer's wet dream. Kristen smiled malevolently and whipped out her iPhone. Here, I'm texting Jen right now and asking her to give you a call. And I'll get you her original email with the story Oliver obviously neglected to include. If you think I've created a phony IP address so I can scam the company for money I have no way of accessing, then be my fucking guest. Now, just calm, but Kristen already was on the other side of the castle door. Okay, here's the thing. We were fighting when the car went off the bridge. I keep forgetting my phone automatically syncs with the Miata's Bluetooth. So I get this call, and I know who it is from the caller ID. So I pick up, not realizing it's about to go on speaker. I pretend it's a client, and then she comes on with a greeting. Well, suffice it to say, it left nothing to the imagination. And like I said, we had a knockdown/drag-out, verbally for God's sake, and we go into the water. After you're thrown from the car, Dr. Singh prompted. I still find it a miracle you survived. We were almost to the northern bank. I hit the water and bobbed up almost immediately, while Kristen landed, in a marshy area. Some dudes had been out fishing, and they got right to me. And since I'd busted the windshield when we smashed through the rail, and the sea was only half submerged, she was able to get out pretty easy. But yeah, miraculously, just a few scratches and some major trauma. Quite an experience to go through together. It can destroy or rebuild a relationship. We got some couples counseling. I promised to cut it off with Jen. That was her name. And we seemed to be back on our old rhythm. Shit. Kristen didn't even want to know Jen's name. Then Jen started calling again. I was honest with Kristen about it and told Jen to fuck off. She finally did, but things started getting worse instead of better. And Kristen was getting weirder, more withdrawn. I finally moved into my attic studio, but I can't seem to get more than a few hours every night. We can look at a prescription for that, the counselor said. And this Jennifer, I had to change chiropractors, and she just, well, I guess you could say she's totally ghosted me. I had to get to a meeting with the printers, but I have to man up and tell you I'm just horribly, terribly sorry for what I suggested. Your Ms. Blackwood left me a voicemail. Nice girl. Young woman. And, well, I guess with your mentoring, it makes sense some of your style might have rubbed off. I'll leave your business to you, including however you want to deal with that rat prick, Oliver. Again, just horribly sorry. We'll talk tomorrow. So that was her boss, the detective said, tapping the stylus on Kristen's screen. We're trying to get in touch with him now. Wonder if she was suicidal? The partner murmured, leaning over the sill carefully, then yanking bank with a grimace. I mean, if she called in the tip on Blackwood, The detective shrugged as they moved outside under the tech's glare. Two dead women. One looks like she's been in that pond 3-4 months. The other makes like a bird out her 4th floor window after making the anonymous call. And get a load of this text string. Thread, gimme, JB. You can't, seriously. Never do that to you. K. Quit calling. JB. PLS. This is nuts. PLS. Come over. Talk this out. K. LV. Him alone. And then it cuts out for a few weeks. They must have talked it out. Or maybe did more than talking. You owe a me. You owe Emma. Credit. K. Where are you? You know. Credit. 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 Rue lonely tonight. Rue lonely. Rue lonely. I see you. 'Cause that ain't some creepy stalker shit. Just go on. K. Kanowski knows. It's over. I have to tell. I come over, talk this out. Jesus. You may want his number. Look at the dates. Todd took the Lake Springfield Bridge and the 94 exit with excess care. After the humiliation of confessing his sins, the string of missed calls from the Sangamon sheriffs, and the maddeningly ambiguous news that Kristen was both a person of interest and the victim of some mishap at the office wouldn't quite coalesce. The ringtone nearly caused him to go off the frontage road. He stabbed at the wheel. The voice from the dashboard was young, female, distant, solicitous, and yet something else. Are you lonely? The Spooky Boogie. Halloween is a holiday that everyone knows well because it's the only time humans and spirits can coexist. Every year on October 31st, the dead rise from their graves and walk among us. The demons crawl out from the shadows because the holy light holds no sway, and even the monsters come out to play. At first, there was bloodshed on both sides, but it didn't take long for humans to adapt to the annual phenomenon by dressing up in silly costumes to blend in with the evil entities. And oddly enough, it worked. When bloodlust is in a demon's eyes, they fail to see the obvious. Over the years, the tradition morphed into a children's fairy tale. And these days, no one bats an eye if a spectral spook passes by. Adults took on a responsible attitude and allowed their little ones to go out and enjoy the night. Soon after, a festive event called trick-or-treating came roaring into every neighborhood around the world. Every girl and boy would get candy if they simply knocked on someone's door and said, "Trick or treat." The evil creatures paid no attention to the humans and their silly ways. They couldn't tell friend from foe when they wore the costumes, or why one of their own would knock on a stranger's door and not tear them apart. It was a farce that became institutionalized in its absurdity. To each their own. As the world grew older, so did the Halloween fairy tale. The traditional holiday of trick-or-treating morphed into a health-conscious day when adults decided that too much sugar was bad for their kids. It became a hot topic for years. But the day of righteousness came when many children became obese. In the end, the simple solution was fair and just. The little ones could still go out on Halloween night, but instead of getting candy, they would get vegetables instead. It wasn't a popular decision, but it became law and was written in stone. The evil spirits didn't care one way or the other because they floated on with their once-a-year Halloween romp, stomp, and boogie. They still couldn't tell humans from demons, but occasionally a slip-up would occur. If someone removed their costume or mask in a spirit's presence, they were torn limb from limb without a second thought. This was a rare occurrence, but an important reminder to parents and children everywhere to always wear their outfits, no matter what. In the wee hours on Lame Street, Timmy Lawson sat before his parents while his mom, Amanda, adjusted his vampire cape. She saw his legs thumping and asked, "Are you nervous about tonight?" Timmy widened his and replied, "No, Mom. My Dracula costume is the best on the block, and I'm ready to go." He parted his mouth slightly to show his fake vampire teeth and snarled, "Arr!" Amanda looked at her watch and bit her bottom lip. Her blonde hair hid her face, but Timmy could sense her apprehension. "I'll be fine, Mom. I know you will," Amanda said. "I'm your mother, and I'm allowed to worry." Timmy folded his arms and frowned. "Mom!" "Fine," Amanda blurted. "You better get going before it gets too late." Doves exploded in Timmy's heart, and he jumped out of his chair. "Yay!" His father, John, who was always overprotective, lowered his evening paper and warned, "Before you go, I want you to be on your best behavior. And remember, no candy or sweets." Amanda parted her golden locks and echoed, "That's right, Timmy. Only vegetables." Timmy lowered his head and slouched. "No one gives out candy anymore. It's against the law." John reached up to his clean-shaven face and removed his black glasses. "That's true, son. But in this world, there are still a lot of people out there who don't follow that law. Just remember, humans are just as bad as those monsters, and perhaps a bit worse." "Okay, Dad." Timmy didn't fully understand, but his dad was a wise man, and he'd be a fool not to listen. "Your father's right," Amanda said. "We just want you to be safe." She knelt and placed a gentle kiss on Timmy's forehead. "Now go have some fun." A bright sparkle filled Timmy's eyes, and an eruption of freedom sprang from his lungs. He grabbed his empty pumpkin bucket and raced through the front door without saying goodbye. The cool night air brushed over his skin like a masterful painter, lightly kissing the canvas with a boisterous color. Lame Street was bustling with children dressed in their favorite costumes: clowns, unicorns, beasts, and all. What an awesome night. Lame Street was a small suburban community where every house looked the same, with trimmed bushes, mowed lawns, and perfectly placed trash cans that stood next to the residential mailboxes by the sidewalk. A place where everyone drove a Prius and worked 9 to 5 jobs. Everything was routine, and that's the way they liked it. As Timmy took in the scene, he noticed that his friends were waiting for him at the end of the driveway. Alice was dressed as a ghost. Her white bed sheet, with the eyes cut out, showed a sliver of red hair, which was a dead giveaway. The werewolf was Fred. There was no mistaking that, because he had an uneven stride and often lingered behind the others to hide his anxiety. Then there was Carrie, dressed in a silky black dress with a matching pointy hat, long fake nose, and a huge brown wart stuck to her right cheek. She was a witch. "What took you so long?" Carrie asked. "We've been waiting here forever." "Sorry," Timmy said, walking towards them. "My parents." "I'm gonna stop you right there, pal," Alice fired. "We all know your parents are a bag of dicks, so let's go before the night ends. The other kids are already going home." Carrie gave Timmy a wry smile as their eyes met, and he took the lead down the sidewalk. "Okay then," Timmy said, with rosy cheeks. "Let's have some fun and get as many vegetables as we can." I don't like vegetables," Fred stuttered, bringing up the rear. The first house they visited was Mr. Sullivan's, their 4th grade math teacher. Timmy knocked 3 times on his oak door, and Mr. Sullivan laughed when it swung open. "Ah, what do we have here? A witch, vampire, ghost, and a werewolf. Trick or treat, Mr. Sullivan," Carrie yelled, holding out her black plastic cauldron. Sullivan smiled and said, "Well, don't you all look so cute?" He reached around the corner and revealed a huge basket of apples. "Here you go, children. I'm afraid I'm out of veggies this evening, so these juicy apples will have to do." Timmy extended a shaky hand and swallowed deep. "My parents said only vegetables. Fruits and veggies are a heaven's delight," Sullivan groaned. "I don't see the harm as long as it's not candy." He pushed the basket further toward the kids. Alice grabbed one and quickly took a bite. The sweet juices dripped down her chin, and she smiled. "See, they're not laced with poison, so grab one and let's go." "Well, you wouldn't know right away, because the poison takes a few minutes to kill you anyway," Fred said, peering through his wolf mask. They all shared a laugh, grabbed an apple, and headed for the next house. "Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. See you back in school." "Okay, children," he said, watching them leave. "Be safe, and don't forget that quiz on Monday." The second house belonged to Jane Thatcher, leader of the neighborhood gossip group. When she answered the door, the kids saw a huge bucket filled with baby carrots. "Hello, kids. You all look nice." Alice held out her ghost bucket and watched Jane throw one baby carrot in. Plop! Alice narrowed her eyes and asked, "What happened to the big carrots we got last year?" Jane drew her lips in and took a deep breath. The kids leaned backward and flared their nostrils because her breath smelled like an ashtray. That's because she smoked a pack a day. Well, times are tough, and you can't blame an old lady for trying to save a little. "That's okay," Timmy said, holding out his pumpkin bucket. "It's better than nothing." Fred held out his wolf bucket and stepped back when he saw Jane place 3 baby carrots inside. He blinked rapidly behind his mask before noticing her ashen breath upon his brow. "There you go, sweetie. I think your costume looks the best. And everyone knows I like my men with a lot of hair." Ha, ha, ho. When he saw her yellow-stained teeth up close, Fred ran away. The others quickly followed, but they couldn't hide their laughter. "Don't forget to come back now, you hear?" Jane yelled. That was gross," Fred moaned. "Ha, ha, ha," laughed Alice. "I think she likes you." Timmy couldn't uncurl his smiling lips. "No, I think she loves you. She wants to pet your fur," Alice scoffed. "All right, guys," Carrie urged, taking off her hat. "That's enough. Fred didn't deserve that, and we have no right to make fun." Fred removed his fury gloves and shook the sweat out. He shuffled his feet, cleared his throat, and coughed. "Ew. I can still taste her rotten breath." Timmy removed his fake fangs and said, "Carrie's right. I'm sorry for laughing at you, but it was a little funny." "Yeah?" Alice said, lifting her bed sheet to suck in the night air. "We were just pulling your leg. We're sorry." Fred swayed from side to side and said, "It's fine. I guess it was a little funny." "You know what we need?" Alice muttered. "We need some candy. That would be awesome." "We can't have candy," Timmy said, looking at the pavement. "Besides, no one around here gives it out anyway." Carrie nodded and gave Alice a pat on the shoulder. "You're right. Getting vegetables every year sucks. And it would be nice to have some sweets." Yeah, Fred agreed. Suddenly, a deep, shallow whisper blew by the children like a small flower floating in the air on a warm summer day. Did someone say candy? Stepping out from the nearby bushes was a small, slender man. His face was a carved pumpkin, and he wore a black top hat with a matching suit with gold trim, boots, and white pants. He held an antique lantern to light his way. The children were speechless. They had never seen a costume like his. "Who are you?" Timmy asked, breaking the silence. His eyes were fixated on the mysterious figure. "Me? I'm Mr. Spooky, silly," he said, bowing. He wobbled over and peered into their plastic buckets. "What's this? An apple? Carrots? Where are the sweet treats?" Alice placed her hands on her hips, and her sheet ruffled in the wind. "We're not allowed to have them. Where have you been hiding? Under a rock or something?" "No," Mr. Spooky said. He held up his lantern and uttered, "I've been locked away in darkness for the longest time, but I found this light, and it has guided me here." Are you a demon?" Fred asked, taking a step back. "I told you already. My name is Mr. Spooky, and there is no other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of lollipops. "I have all the sweet treats you could ask for." Alice widened her eyes, and the sheet covering her face became moist at the mouth. "Wow!" Timmy shook his head when he heard his parents' words echo. No candy, only vegetables. The thought sent a river of snakes sliding down his sight. "We're not allowed to have any candy, Mr. Spooky." "What?" Mr. Spooky shrieked. "No candy? That's absurd. Don't you know what day this is?" Carrie stepped forward and brushed Mr. Spooky's hand away. She didn't want to hear any more of his nonsense. "Look, Timmy's right. We can't have candy, no matter how much we want it. It's the law. If we break it, we'll be grounded forever." "How rude," Mr. Spooky said. "No child should ever be grounded. My candy will free you and make you fly like the birds in the sky." Look, man, we appreciate your offer, but we need to go now," Fred said. The children turned their backs to Mr. Spooky and left him alone with an upside-down smile. They didn't mean to hurt his feelings, but in their defense, they were trying to do the right thing. Mr. Spooky thought and thought as the children walked away. No child should ever go without sweet treats. I must change their minds. "Wait!" he called out. The kids stopped and turned. "I have a spooktacular idea. We should do the Spooky Boogie dance. It always cheers me up. And then maybe you will have some delicious treats." Before the children could say anything, Mr. Spooky stuck out his butt and twirled around like a dancing clown. Timmy, Alice, Fred, and Carrie had a strong urge to run away. But they stood firmly and watched Mr. Spooky because he was just too darn cute. Before they knew it, he broke out into a song. "Everybody twirl your body. Do the Spooky Boogie. Clap, clap, clap. Throw your hands up now. And clap, clap, clap. Stick that booty out. And clap, clap, clap. Do the Spooky Boogie. Shuffle here and shuffle there. Do the Spooky Boogie. The Spooky Boogie." Mr. Spooky's song and dance intoxified the air like a poison mist, and the children soon found themselves twirling and singing along. Their minds were like a lost ship sailing into uncharted waters. The discovery of a newfound rebellion was at hand. Within minutes, candy rained down, much to Mr. Spooky's delight. "Oh, how wonderful! Sweet treats from the heavens above. Dig in now and enjoy the splendor." Timmy clenched his stomach and stiffened his jaw. "No? Our parents said no, but I say yes. What good is Halloween if we can't enjoy a sweet snack?" Mr. Spooky spun around and threw more candy at the children. Alice was the first child to give in to the wicked bliss. She picked up a chocolate bar and took a big bite. "Oh, this is wonderful!" Fred grabbed a piece of Laffy Taffy and bit into the sticky goodness. As it stretched an arm's length, he smiled and said, "This is good." Carrie and Timmy held out the longest, but after seeing their friends give in, they had to sample the goods. They grabbed a peanut butter bar and crunched down. No words came, but Mr. Spooky could tell they loved it by their upward smiles. "That's it, my lovelies. Eat. Eat until you've had your fill of sugary sweets." Mr. Spooky twirled and swirled like a ballerina and watched the children devour the candy like a pack of wild dogs. They were in it deep now and munched away every ounce of the candy. They ate so much that they fell to the pavement. They were plump, juicy, and ripe. "Now that you've all had your fill, I suppose I shall have mine," Mr. Spooky growled, walking around their fallen bodies. "You all look so delicious." Timmy rolled over and mumbled, "No, you can't do this." Mr. Spooky cackled at Timmy's protest. He raised his lantern and smashed it down on his head. The impact did nothing more than shut his mouth. With another twirl, a thick plume of purple smoke filled the air, and Mr. Spooky transformed into a hideous demon. His sweet pumpkin face gave birth to devious evil that was hidden all along. He ripped his suit off to reveal a pair of old brown overalls that covered a dusty white shirt. His voice had also changed. It was deeper and more demonic. "Yummy, yummy. You children are now full of sugar, just the way I like my sweet treats." Mr. Spooky reached into his overalls and pulled out 2 sharp kitchen knives that twinkled in the moonlight. Now, stay still while I cut you up to pieces. I can't eat you whole after all. Ha 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 ha." Alice still had a piece of chocolate in her mouth, and as Mr. Spooky walked towards her, knives dangling by his side, she spat out the sugary treat. He carelessly stepped into the sticky goo and fell with a thunderous thud. His blade slid in front of Timmy and Carrie, and they grabbed them with lightning speed. Fred exploded to his feet and tackled Mr. Spooky so he couldn't escape. You're not going anywhere." Even he was surprised at his newfound courage. "That's right," Alice yelled, standing. "The one thing about sugar is that it messes with your mind and makes you want more." "Yeah," Timmy said, holding his head. "And we are still hungry." "What?" Mr. Spooky shouted. "You can't do this to me." Mr. Spooky writhed back and forth, trying to break free from Fred's grasp, but it was useless. Timmy and Carrie seized the moment, plunged their blades into Mr. Spooky's head, and cut away huge chunks of pumpkin slices. He screamed like a dying cat. Alice and Fred stuck their mouths inside his skull and drank deeply with their sticky lips. They spat out the seeds and laughed. Timmy and Carrie continued carving away until their sugar rush melted away and ate what was left. The last thing Mr. Spooky heard was someone chomping down on his skull. Later that night, the children agreed to return to Timmy's house to watch some scary movies. They promised each other that they would never talk about what had happened. When they walked through the door, Timmy's parents asked, "Did you all eat your vegetables?" In one collective voice, they said, "Yes, we did." Almost angels. "I dare you." Meryl couldn't resist a dare. She never could. She opened the car door and ran out into the cemetery. It was a night in a million. Not fog, but low clouds hovered around the gravestones. So satisfyingly spooky. There were no stars, but the overcast sky above was bright with moonlight. Meryl could see her way just fine and hid behind a tall stone that read, Margaret Lesko, 1840 to 1913. A woman who died over 100 years ago, and her stone yet survived. "Here I come," said Lucas. Meryl held her breath to keep from laughing and put her hand over her mouth. What she'd meant to do was jump out when Lucas ran past, throw her arms around his muscular shoulders, and wrestle him to the ground. Then they'd kiss. And then she heard his footsteps running across the grass. He called her name while headed in the wrong direction. She was going to wail, "Lucas!" in a horror story voice. But several male voices interrupted from somewhere, and she held it in. "Who are you?" "No! No!" A gunshot, moonlight, shined through the kitchen window onto her mother's table. A vase of dead flowers with a little card on a stick lost its color in the pale light. A pile of used tissues surrounded a box of Kleenex used to prop up her senior picture. "Mom?" she called out. No answer. "Mom?" She opened her mother's bedroom door. Both her parents were asleep in bed. She kissed her mother's cheek, still wet from tears. Mom stirred and smiled without waking. Meryl walked through the halls of the high school, looking for Lucas. Her friends were just up ahead. When the bell rang, everyone disappeared into the classrooms. Meryl drifted into first-hour social studies and sat at her desk. Sue Ann shivered as she walked past and put her jacket back on. The words imports and exports were written on the board. Lucas's seat was empty. Lucas's parents and siblings stood outside the hospital room. Meryl tried to see inside room 314A, but a team of medical personnel surrounded the bed. Machinery breathed and pulsed lights. "Lucas?" she called. No answer. She could have gone inside, but she didn't want to interrupt the doctors. "I love you, Lucas," she whispered. Autumn, and the trees had turned. A mildly wild wind rustled through the colorful leaves, backdropped by a steel gray sky. Meryl strolled through Charlton Park, kicking the leaves on the ground. During the summer months, roses filled the gardens, and on Saturdays, brides, grooms, and their guests filled the park with ceremonies. Now, the roses were supplanted by burning bushes and mums. Some weddings were still performed in the park during this time of year, but not today. It was Thursday and chilly, and no one else was here. Not even a dog walker. She walked to the playground and sat in Lucas's swing, the one he used when they came together. Here, they had slid down the slides and got silly dizzy on the old-fashioned merry-go-round. I dare you to slide head first. Lucas had taken her up on the dare, and she followed after him. Then they slid down the slide together in each other's arms. A police car drove slowly through the park, looking them over because they'd been making so much noise. It was only 8 o'clock, but dark settled early this time of year. The police station was downtown. Merrill walked past the desk clerks and the stairs where they kept the bodies waiting to be identified by their loved ones. She wouldn't think about that. She sat down in the chair in front of Detective Greta O'Neill's desk. The pictures of 4 men sat on top of paper files. Merrill shuddered. "That's them," she said. But there were only 3. Who is this 4th man? When Detective O'Neill left her seat, Merrill read the report. It seemed Lucas had interrupted the execution of the 4th man, who'd been able to run away before Merrill got there. The 4th man was under protection as a witness to this crime and others. He owed a great deal of money to an organization of criminals. There was a jewelry store on the corner, a few blocks away from the police station. Merrill looked through the window at the rings, the same window she and Lucas had looked through together. The diamond with the golden heart was gone. It had been a small diamond, a 1/4 carat maybe, but Lucas had asked which one was her favorite, and she'd told him she loved that one. Someone said Lucas had bought a ring. Had he? Where was it? She looked at her hand, surprised to see it on her finger. She didn't remember Lucas giving it to her. It belongs to her. She should have it. Who said that? Lucas's mother? Merrill always had the feeling Mrs. Kessler didn't like her. Lucas would have wanted her to have it. Yes, Mrs. Kessler's voice. They had slipped it onto her finger at the funeral home and buried her with the ring. She glanced over her clothes and found herself not wearing the clothes she died in, but the dress she'd worn for her senior pictures. The same dress she'd worn to her funeral. So confusing to be dead at first. All her friends were there. Everyone from the high school she knew and didn't know. Every one of her relatives. Poor grandma. She didn't understand. Her parents were so sad. And Lucas's parents. Merrill ran out from her hiding spot behind the stone toward the sound of the gun. Lucas lay as still as the grave markers surrounding him. Blood ran from his head to his face. The man holding the gun was surprised to see her running toward him at full speed, yelling for Lucas. Unafraid, he lowered the weapon and smirked, nearly laughing. What have we here? He hadn't expected her to jump at him the way she did, and it knocked him to the ground. As he fell, she wrested the gun from his hand and shot. After that, one of the other two men put their hands around her neck and choked her life away. As she faded, she saw a bright light open wide above her head, and the gunman rushed toward it. Before he got there, a shadow whisked him away. The light waited for her, but Meryl stayed behind with Lucas. The red and blue lights came too late for her, but not for him. She rode to the hospital in the ambulance. Meryl sat on Lucas's hospital bed with her arms around him. His mother sat in the chair closest to the bed. His father sat beside her, and his two younger brothers sat in the room's wide window seat. No one spoke as the machines whistled and pumped. There's little to no activity in the brain. He may never come out of the coma. He will never breathe on his own. Spend as much time as you like with him. You tell us when. Lucas opened his eyes and smiled when he saw Meryl. The machines set off alarms. A doctor came in and checked Lucas's vitals, then shook his head at the family. He disconnected all the machines and left the room so Lucas's family could say goodbye. Meryl cried, while his family suffered through the realization that all hope was lost. His mother was the last to leave the room. The worst was watching Lucas work out that he was dead. "I'm here," she whispered. A bright light opened wide above them as they held each other. "Shall we go?" Lucas asked of the light. "Do you think they'll let us stay together?" They kissed and decided to stay a little longer. "We can always come back to the hospital and jump up into someone else's light," they reasoned. "We shall see." After Lucas's funeral, he wore a suit instead of a hospital gown. They found they could revisit any place they'd already been, including the movie theater. Every night, they kissed their mothers on their cheeks as they slept. It was years later, in October, on the road beside the cemetery, long past dark. A pair of headlights came into view and headed their way. "I'm going to scream this time," said Meryl. "I dare you." "I will." When the car was close enough, Meryl and Lucas stepped in front of it. Meryl screamed. Tires squealed and screeched, and gravel flew as the car came near to losing control and then stopped. "Did you see that?" the driver screamed. "I saw it," the passenger screamed back. The ghosts of those murdered teenagers that haunt this road every year. I think I even got it on video. If you're all right, then let's go. There's no signal out here, and I can't wait to post this. Down under the Manhattan Bridge. Overpass. Running along the streets of Lower Manhattan, crossing over Center Street. I kept an even tempo. The sky suddenly darkened as heavy clouds covered the blue sky like spilled ink clouding out over parchment paper. I could have turned back and avoided the storm, but I needed to get my miles in. Post the numbers. Do the work. Think of that Starbucks cappuccino and the warmed-up butter croissant that's waiting for you. I had already gone 5 miles by that point, but 6 miles was my daily minimum, and I was hurting. Right calf cramping, stitch in my side, labored breathing. Count your steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tyson is the best. Tyson can't be beat. The training was the only place where the force of my will held sway. The only thing in my control. Ever since the accident, it was even more important to stick to the plan. Keep my health intact. For without that, there was no livelihood, no finding a partner, no future family, no legacy to mark the fact I was here and alive. Without that, I was nothing but an advertising account manager in an agency. The net purpose of my life being to create desire in people's minds and associate their pre-existent needs with a brand that had the answer to their woes. It is all snake oil, really. There is no such thing, no panacea. I learned that in the hospital. I kept asking, isn't there a drug or something to reverse that? Their heads shook. No? Isn't there anything that can help with that? Help the healing process? Their heads shook. Just rest and rehab and my will. Just work and luck. As I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, I dodged an older Ukrainian woman with a shawl and a steel utility cart filled with groceries. A bunch of kids walking along with their heads down on their phones, smoking stogies and taking drags off vape pens. And dozens of sightseers taking selfies. None of them were turning back. None of them were chastened by the storm. And I wasn't going to abandon my planned training over some weather. I needed to get in my daily 6-mile allotment. I owed it. I couldn't come up short. Everything depended on consistency, inerrancy, and discipline. I remembered laying in the hospital bed after waking up from the induced coma. I remembered rehab for the foot drop in my left foot that wouldn't flex due to the paralysis of the nerves, the damned peroneal nerve that I'd never heard of until it became my nemesis. For a while after the stroke, I couldn't see from my right peripheral and experienced a kind of pause in my thoughts during conversations. Just lost my bearings and couldn't remember what was just said. In tests at the neurologist, I couldn't repeat a simple sentence, which made it hard to carry on a conversation. That is how it goes. One day, everything is normal, and then you get struck by lightning, or in my case, a Prius. Taking my bike out to buy groceries on a Tuesday night, I got sideswiped by a Prius and suffered head trauma that resulted in a stroke. The rain came forth in a downpour. The wind cracked like the lashes of a whip, and the cold exhalation of the river pulled the heat out of the autumn air. I felt the first warning droplets, sprinkles of mist, icy tendrils. Then they came harder, steadier, coating my forehead in a glaze of salty New York City rain, all acid and recycled Hudson River sludge. Truth be told, I alternated between the carrot and the stick. I'd count steps, give myself a little rah-rah stuff, and think of my after-run meal. But I'd be lying if I didn't own up to the fact that most of it was an evil drill sergeant saying, "Who are you kidding, you worthless loser? And your life is nothing. You are nothing. You're a fucking loser. Worthless. A piece of shit. Why do you even exist?" And worse, that is the voice, which has been more persistent since the stroke. And after the stroke, there were also occasional visions and hallucinations, usually malevolent ones, fears brought to life in the form of ghouls or ghosts, scarecrows or hobgoblins, just 80s B-movie stuff mostly. Nothing truly terrifying. A few moments later, the deluge crashed over my shoulders like shower water, running down my back, a furious gush of water. And the wind hit my face, buffeting me with unrelenting blows. And the wind slapped my back, muffling the street sounds and cocooning me in the isolating cone of rumbling storm sounds. It was isolating and unpleasant, the farthest thing possible from 70 degrees and sunny. When I finally came over to the Brooklyn side of the bridge and found some city ground shielded from the wind by buildings, with sufficient overhangs to shield me from the rain, the air was cold and crisp, perfect autumn air, redolent of carpets of crunchy brown leaves crunching underfoot on the sidewalks. But I was already soaked to the bone. I made my way down into Dumbo, sailing along by buildings with Merlot-covered bricks on their faces, watching you as you go, and cobblestone streets that give back sound as you clomp along, as if they are conversing with you and warning of the things hidden in alleyways and liminal spaces amid the cityscape. I headed under the Manhattan Bridge overpass by Adams Street to where people were enjoying the cool weather at wooden picnic tables and congregating to enjoy the autumn evening. They were all dry and had arrived before the storm rolled in. Happy with themselves, no doubt, for their attention to the weather report on their iPhones. Applauded, I could not boast. I joined them and sat at a picnic table, drenched in cold rain. Steam coming off my face, my forehead, and my very breath. The rain was in my sweat-wicking t-shirt, in my Lululemon running sweatpants, and my water-resistant running shoes were squishing out water like a wrung sponge as I walked to the bench and sat down in a heap. A puddle of waterlogged defeat. An old Jamaican man directly across from me had a gray glass eye beneath drapes of dreadlocks. He was playing chess with a young black boy, school age, wearing a ball cap. There was a midget. He was a handsome fellow, square and black-haired with a side part, wearing a collared shirt and khakis, carrying himself with the deportment of a king. He was clean-faced, with a small mustache, giving just a hint of the rebel. I saw a red-haired woman in a green dress walking past. I saw a crow fly through the archway, down toward Pebble Beach. It was a surreal moment, separated out of time. And then, as I sat calmly, looking about, I heard a sound. It was a chirping whistle, a piping, a chattering screech. Chwee, pep, chwee, chwee. The sound came again, haunting, melodious, distressed. Chwee, pep, chwee, chwee, oop, chwee. Then on the heels of the sound was a mocking chortle. Orb, qua, orb, qua. I looked about. I looked at the red-haired woman in the green dress who had sat down and was talking to a 7-foot-tall monster, a giant, who looked like an adult sitting at the tea table outside on the back lawn of a doll's house. They went on chit-chatting without a hint of disturbance. I looked at the Jamaican man with the dreadlocks and the glass eye. He moved his rook nonchalantly across the left-hand side of the board, capturing a threatening bishop with a satisfied smile. I could not see the little boy's reaction, but he was a gaunt boy, malnourished, with a Yankees ball cap. I looked at the midget, who was reading a book in the light of the golden hour, facing outward on the park bench he chose, oblivious to his surroundings. Did none of them hear it? Chwee, pepe, chwee, chwee. Then I looked up and identified the sound. The thing that made it. It was perched, inverted, clinging with claws like meat hooks that dug deeply into the concrete of the archway, holding the sinuous body in defiance of gravity. Its coat was a brilliant golden color that shimmered like fall leaves coated in nail polish and adorned with 1,000 tiny shimmering gemstones. It glistened with a slight pink hue. Its tail was a lion's tail, through and through, a happy, wagging tail that was at least 2 feet in length, with a big pom-pom on its end. It had a spiraling circular mane from neck to shoulder blade that transitioned from white feather to golden fur, capturing all the colors of the palette in between. And its wings. They hewed closely to the torso, the muscular lion's torso, draping the sides, a gold leaf texture, reminiscent of the hammered, thin, unmistakable coating on bar ceilings from a bygone age that features the iconography of the architect's fancy in repeating patterns and frames the rooms in an unnatural glow. And the head. The head was the most haunting. An eagle's head. That regal head the beak with flaring nostril holes, alternating in the light between bright canary yellow and deep amber. A thing of menace, and the eyes, big and raven-like, but sad. A killer's stare. Eyes that encompass the eddies of shame mixed in with the confident assurance of death itself. The black swirl of destiny that has come to pass. Chui-e-pep-e, chui-chui. The thing sprinted along the archway to the ground like a circus motorcycle in a cage, seemingly immune to gravitational pull. Its footfalls light and quick. Impossibly light and quick. And it was off toward Pebble Beach. I sprang to my feet and ran after it, running at a high tempo, not knowing why I was giving chase. At first, I could see it ahead of me on Adams Street, heading north toward Water Street, and I picked up the pace. It ran along the sidewalk beneath some scaffolding, and then leaped upside down, running along the underside of the scaffolding like a weightless mirage. I sprinted hard, and lactic acid was pooling in my legs. We bore left on the cobblestones of Water Street, and the creature was back on the ground, pulling away from me, leaping with long, fast strides over the cobblestones. My legs grew heavy and leaden. Just past Jacques Torres Chocolate, it grew so small in the distance that it became like a lonely speck of gold. Finally, the creature reached Pebble Beach and the great glass cube over Jane's carousel, and leaped again over the velvet stanchion ropes at the entrance, and perched atop the carousel frame. I finally reached the attraction and ducked inside, leaning against the glass walls of the display to catch my breath. I watched as the creature circled around the top of the carousel. The carousel started up, and strains of old-fashioned music from the band organ floated over the river, mingling with the sound of crowds passing by. Da, dun, dun, da, dun, da, da, da. The 48 hand-carved wooden horses began to rise and fall as they circled Brooklyn Bridge Park. Chui-e-pep-e, chui-chui. The alien visage of this wrangle creature, with the head of a old eagle, vocalized its haunting call, and then regarded me, head motionless, at full height over its tucked in and perched haunches, front legs straight, shoulders drawn back. It sat stationed on the far, ornamental exterior work beyond the moving mechanisms of the carousel, which spun beneath him. And it fixed its gaze and continued to regard me in eerie silence. Was this some apparition? A lengthy hallucination caused by my damaged neural veins? Or could this impossible vision be real? You dare to chase after me? It said, not in the voice of an ordinary man, but in a booming voice, like that of a great general. I thought it was a hallucination. I had to see if you were real. I said, this is no dream. boy. What stands before you has the strength of a lion and the wisdom of an eagle. I am the protector of great treasures. I test men's merits and search their hearts in hopes of finding, in any of you, the nobility and courage required. It said, "Well, I guess I'd best be going back home. I was just finishing up a run. I wasn't looking for treasures or claiming nobility or anything like that," I said, beginning to walk toward the door. "Stop. Don't take another step. Are you telling me there's nothing your heart desires?" the creature asked. "Desires? Too numerous to mention. But right now, I just want my health back. A sliver of confidence, maybe," I said. That isn't much. What would you use this health for? What would you do with your courage? Run in circles? Aim for a promotion? Settle down with a girl? Is there nothing more that drives you than a hamster wheel? Some money to throw at creature comforts? And settling down? No sense of adventure? It asked. Not for nothing, but making rent in Brooklyn and starting a family in this day and age is an adventure. Let me tell you, I said. Enough, insolent little man. You see these horses on this carousel? He asked. I see them, I said. Horses are the natural enemies of us griffins, the griffin said. Why? I asked. Because horses are mindless servants that serve the will of the pure and the wicked alike. Lemmings, good-natured creatures, almost aristocratic in their complete humility and subservience, but to no end. Us griffin are creatures of purpose, and you, my friend, are giving horse vibes, the griffin said. So, what is my purpose then? I asked. A better question would be, what is the purpose? But at least you are on the right track, the griffin said. Okay, so what is that? I asked. I must be on my way now, but I will see you again, the griffin said. And it turned, and in a flash, the griffin jumped over my head, landed outside of the display, by Pebble Beach, and with long, fluid strides, like a leopard, dove onto the river and began churning across the water. Legs turning so quickly, it looked like the spinning wheels of a locomotive. The powerful wings opened, and it took flight, flapping those giant, golden, shimmering wings as it soared out of sight. I continued my run back home, churning my legs, a fire in my abdomen, heaviness in my legs, a drowsy, delayed hitch in my left leg's footfalls. And as I reached Williamsburg and was almost home, I suddenly collapsed. A light was shining in my eyes as I came to. A red-haired woman in green medical scrubs was flashing a light to test my pupils. Doctor, pupils constricting normally and dilating with the removal of the light, she said, looking down next to her. Monitor the patient for the next half hour, order up an EKG, and let me know of any unusual speech patterns observed, the man said. The doctor was a midget. He had a commanding presence, despite his small stature. As he walked out of the room, the nurse did a few more tests and then turned back to me and said, "Rest up. You'll need your strength." A few minutes later, a giant man with a huge forehead entered. He had to be 7 feet tall. He said, "I am here to put some heparin and warfarin into the IV drip. It'll just take a minute." The man placed the screw-on syringe into an input tube and pushed the drugs into my IV drip. Then he flashed a friendly smile and was off. Finally, a Jamaican man with dreadlocks and one gray glass eye walked into my room and started writing on the whiteboard on the wall in front of me. "Roger," he wrote on the board. "I'm Roge, like Rogie, and I'll be taking care of you these next few days. Just press down on that dar button if you be needing anything, and I'll be right in to sort you out. Okay?" I nodded at the man as he left, and scanning the room, I saw a little black boy in the bed next to me. He was asleep, and his head was covered with a Yankees baseball cap. He lay there completely still, in a coma, or maybe sleeping, just as gaunt and frail as they come. I had taken my EKG tests, had been wheeled around for some scans, and then brought back to my room. Exhausted, I'd passed out for a bit. After coming to from a short nap, I heard it again. Shwee e pep e chwee chwee. Looking before me in the room, I saw the griffin. It was seated in the corner by the open window, letting in the cool October air. "What's your why?" the griffin said. "What?" I asked. "You want to get better, right?" the griffin asked. "Of course," I said. "You're going to need something a lot heavier than a Starbucks cappuccino and a croissant to put up with what this life's gonna throw at you. You're gonna need a lot more treasure to make the adventure worthwhile," the griffin said. "I don't know what that is," I said. "There will be time, my boy, to find it," the griffin said. "But are you even real?" I asked. "I am real, if you believe," the griffin said. "But what is a purpose to live for? Give me an example," I asked. "That is up to you," the griffin said. And with that, jumped through the window, calling back, "It's all up to you." And as he took flight, I felt a searing pain in my left shoulder. Chwee-a, pep-a, chwee-chwee.